Hello and welcome to the very first Girls with Goals of 2019. I'm Niamh. Maher, you're very welcome back. I hope you had a lovely Christmas and New Year's and all that jazz. This week we're talking a little bit about resolutions, but more importantly, in my opinion, we're talking about anxiety and the kind of struggles that people can have around this time of year. So a little bit later on, we'll be joined by musician Molly Sterling, who's taking part in an incredible festival. But first, I'm delighted to welcome my very first guest to studio of 2019. Broadcaster and columnist Nadine O'Regan is here.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, you're very welcome.
It's lovely to be here. This is a great studio.
Thank you.
I have been following your podcast with interest. First, obviously, on the likes of SoundCloud, but now you're on YouTube. You're all over the place. There are cameras and disembodied voices like the Wizard of Oz talking to us through earpieces and all sorts. It's very exciting.
That's actually just Paul. He just kneels behind the couch and just stands back there. So yeah, no, it is. It's good. So we're very happy to be here, and we're very happy to be starting 2019 with yourself. So we're going to talk a little bit about First Fortnight European Mental Health, Art and Cultural Festival, and that's what you're taking part in. And I want to tell everybody exactly what you're doing. It's so interesting and it's an incredible festival. It kicked off on New Year's Day. And it's kind of about the challenge and breaking down the stigmas around mental health. But before we get into that, we're going to start off with our game, which we start off every show with. So it's called 6 Words or Less, and it's for any of our readers and listeners and viewers of the show who may not know who you are. So you have to describe yourself in 6 words or less, so in your own time.
All right. I tried to come up with 6 words.
Okay.
I kept overrunning on the 6-word thing, and I've just boiled it down to the pure essence, because I think I might do many jobs in life, but the thing that I know that I am and always have been is a madly passionate arts fan. That's me. It's how everything else has happened. I got into books and music at a very young age, never intended to get into journalism, never intended to get into presenting or broadcasting, never intended to do a podcast, anything like that. And it was just because I was really interested in, like, I loved music so much. I'd go to every gig I could. I was reading every book I could. And the follow-on was inevitable, that you want to meet your heroes or you want to write about the gigs that you would have gone to, and so everything more or less just came from there. Yeah, I didn't study journalism.
Secrets out, secrets out. Nadine, your award-winning journalist is plastered all over you.
Well, I studied English and philosophy in UCC, and then I did a master's in creative writing. So obviously, it wasn't maybe the most practical of kind of degree duos, but just followed my passion, made my hobby into my career.
I think that's an incredible thing, and I think people who get to do that are so lucky as well. But when I look at your career, like, and where you started out, it was very quick that you kind of went into reporting, if you will, on the arts and culture and stuff. So was that like really key? As if, well, okay, if I'm going to go in and be a news reporter, for example, I want to definitely like steer myself towards the things that I'm most passionate about. Yeah,
no, I really just followed my nose completely. Like, I started writing for the Connacht Tribune over a summer when I was in college, and I was 19, and I had gotten a lead that somebody there would give me a week's work experience, but when I turned up, he wasn't there. He was on his holidays. But I persuaded them to let me stay in the office, and the following Monday I just turned up and nobody told me to leave. Yeah. So I stayed there.
That's a really key thing. Yeah. I remember I was kind of like that when I started as well, interning. Like, you're there, and as long as nobody is telling you to leave, you're probably doing something right. Yeah. They're not necessarily telling you to stay either, but they're just not escorting you out.
That was the thing. I think nobody in that open plan office wanted to be the one to take the 19-year-old and dunk them outside the door. But actually it was interesting, because that was, obviously back in what would have been sort of late 1990s. And nowadays I hear an awful lot about intern culture, and where people aren't getting paid, and that is a big looming issue, because it's undermining other people who are in paid positions. And I strongly disagree with the way intern culture has been going, where it's substituting for real jobs and employers are getting free labour essentially. However, the one thing I would say against that is my experience, which was, what was it, 6 or 8 weeks. I didn't get paid during that time, but I did wind up writing half-page articles, and I learnt a massive amount. So I kind of think that if you're getting something, do it for a few weeks anyway. Do you know what I mean? And get the skill. Like, by the end of it, they had published my work, on numerous occasions in the paper, and then I suddenly had this portfolio at the age of 19. So even though I wasn't intending on becoming a journalist, when I went back to UCC for the third year of my degree, and I happened to run into Fionn Sheehan, who was the then editor of the UCC college newspaper. He's now the editor of the Irish Independent.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, I'd love to write about gigs, or I'd love to write about music or something. I was totally like free form. I was just really passionate.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, have you written anything? And I said, in fact, I have.
Yeah.
And that was purely because I had just said, suck it up, do the 6 weeks. And I'm not saying it's for everyone, and I'm not saying the culture as a whole with intern culture is a positive thing, but if you're getting something from it, be conscious that you are gaining the skill which could prove invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of in the exact same boat as you when it comes to that, because I worked for free as well for a good few weeks at a radio station when I started out. And like that, it wasn't something that I was like, yay, I'm not getting paid for. But I just knew that I was gaining kind of invaluable experience. And things have shifted a lot, I think, in the last kind of decade or so. And I think it's really good that obviously, you know, a certain element of that intern culture is gone. But I also think that maybe people are missing out on getting those valuable kind of portfolios, like you said, inadvertently. So like, as in you were still being published, I was getting on air, like these were the kind of things that were absolutely crucial. Maybe it was because we weren't being paid, you know.
And the other thing is, it gives you the opportunity to make mistakes, because if you're making mistakes while you're on work experience or as an intern, nobody is really going to hold you accountable. And everybody makes mistakes when they're starting out. People make mistakes throughout their careers, but particularly at the start. So it allows you to get rid of some of those mistakes in a quieter way.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
So you're the books and arts editor with the Sunday Business Post, but a lot of people will know you from your radio show, which was on Today FM for years, Songs in the Key of Life. It finished up there in the summer, and I know there was a huge amount of reaction on Twitter and online, and a huge amount of support for you and what you were doing for that show. Obviously, you said in your statement that you were disappointed as well. So I mean,
I'm pretty honest.
Yeah.
Like, not everyone is when it comes to these things. But you see, I suppose what's important to say is, number one, that I was very proud of the show, and the show had achieved a lot. It had won 2 awards, the Irish Radio Awards. It had got its highest ever listenership that year, and it had acquired a fan base. But I think even aside from that, a lot of radio presenters come into the industry and they're given a show to present.
Yeah.
Whereas this was quite different. I had conceived the show, suggested it to the then heads of the Dublin station TXFM, and they had agreed to take it on. And then the show was very successful for that station, and then transferred to Today FM. So I guess because I had a much greater sense of ownership over it, because it was a kind of a creation that I had sort of written on my computer as a template, pitched, and then brought from one station to another. I couldn't do, I think maybe what some people would do, which is to just say nothing at all. Yeah. I honestly remain very proud of that show and what it accomplished. And I think we all know the radio industry changes, or is changing massively. All the kind of print and broadcast industries are changing at such a rapid pace that you have to be very pragmatic about it and say, look, this is the way it's going. Certain stations are shrinking, other stations are evolving to meet different demands of the audience. But that didn't change the fact that I was going to just say, look, very proud of the show. I loved the guests that I had on it. You know, everyone from Davie, who's going to be my guest at the First Fortnight Festival coming up, to, you know, international guests, Chris O'Dowd, well, he's Irish as well, but feels kind of international now. And, you know, we were talking earlier about Maher of the 1975 was on the show. Neil Hannon of the Divine Comedy was my first guest. So, it was something that, like, it was such a great experience for me. Yeah,
I mean, what I loved about the show was that it was so specialist in that, like, it wasn't just a classic kind of music show. It was these guests talking about moments in their life through music, and it was obviously something that you had conceived and thought that this would be an incredible show, and you were right, like it was. And you were saying there that obviously radio continues to change, and I suppose you have a podcast now as well, so you've moved. You've moved into that more, and obviously, like the show here as well. I used to be in radio, and you know, I wanted to kind of focus more on female-focused content, and that didn't suit where I was. So, without obviously like bashing anybody or talking about anything like that, do you think that it is slightly counterproductive that some of these specialist shows you know, aren't being highlighted on national radio as much when podcasting is so huge now, and people actually do want specialist programming, do you know? They want it, I think.
It was really interesting. I think on your own Twitter feed, you have a pinned tweet talking about why you left radio, and you say that you left because you weren't able to do the kind of radio that you wanted to do. And after Songs in the Key of Life finished, I was approached by a number of stations, brilliant stations, with a view to doing the same or similar type show again. And it's not something I would rule out in the future, but I kind of realised that I needed to draw back a little bit and get my energy back for doing everything that I started out wanting to do. And I was like, right, I'm going to do the podcast. I'm going to go back to basics and learn, because podcasting is a field that's totally new to me. I'm still finding my way a little bit in the dark. You're miles ahead, obviously. But it's been really, really interesting, because all of a sudden I'm meeting other podcasters and I'm listening to all these podcasts where there are intimate conversations unfolding maybe over the course of an hour, where you're in someone's ear, or as a listener, you're listening to this very sort of intimate and often very personal conversation that I'm not sure radio accommodates quite as well anymore. So that has been, for me at least, the whole podcast experience. The name of my podcast is My Roots Are Showing.
It's such a great name as well. I love that. Well, how did you come up with that?
It was a bit of fun. A friend of mine had a magazine a few years back that folded, and he had a section in it. It was State magazine, actually a music magazine, but there was a little section in it called My Roots Are Showing. And I remember looking at it and thinking, that's such a great name. And then subsequently the magazine didn't survive, and when it came time to come up with a name, honestly it was a holding pattern name, you know, like almost everything was, it was like, oh, I need a name, I need a thing, you know.
Of course.
So, and then I was like, that name, because it means that for podcasts it's a lot more difficult to get the rights to use songs, for example, running through your podcast, which is what I would have done with Songs in the Key of Life. So with My Roots Are Showing, it removes the need for me to play music if I don't want to. So I could interview a politician, for example, and we could talk about music, but I wouldn't have to have full songs and get the licensing. So to some extent it was getting away from that. And in another way, I think we all have in our heads sort of little memos where you're like, that was a great name, or this is a great name. And my friend, shout out to John Walsh, he came up with the name. He was like, oh, you got the name, and I was like, John, it has to live somewhere. So he was cool with it.
It's brilliant. And so, I mean, like you said there, you know, you can speak to other people, so it's different from what you were doing, obviously, as in it's not heavily focused on playing music, because that's kind of the nature of what podcasting is, you know, and licensing and stuff like that is a bit of a nightmare. But is that something that you're looking at as, like you said, a new challenge? Are you excited to kind of learn through a different medium almost, and then still put it out there?
Well, what I've kind of realised is that the experience of broadcasting, because I was producing and presenting the show, I started on Phantom in 2006, presenting and producing The Kiosk, which was an art show. Then I did The Breakfast Club and TXFM, then Songs in the Key of Life. And to a certain extent, you begin to sort of repeat a pattern a little bit. So with the podcast, I was like, right, it is definitely just a little bit free form at the moment, but like I do hope to hone it and truly come back to you maybe in a year and go, this is it, this is the thing. I'm sure when you started as well.
Oh yeah, well I started as a sports podcast, so yeah, I mean things change, you know. Before we were here, it was originally envisioned in my head as just sports, and then I kind of realized that actually my interests go further than just sports, and so we still have like lots of athletes who come on, and it's incredible to talk to them, but I realized that, like, you know, it's broader than that, and there was an appetite for that as well. So it definitely evolves, which is a really interesting thing to kind of see when you have the freedom to kind of curate your own content, I suppose.
But at the crux of it always, though, for me would be the interview, because I love talking to people. And I think probably just with this particular podcast, I want to extend it out further, because I think with Songs in the Key of Life, I was concentrating mainly on artists. And with My Roots Are Showing, I think it's a very interesting time in Ireland. Obviously, the repeal movement throughout the course of 2018, the same-sex marriage referendum having been passed. There's an incredibly interesting sort of grassroots political movements taking place in Ireland, and I felt like maybe with a more pure art show, I wasn't really tapping into that. So for the second show of My Roots Are Showing, we actually did it as a live kind of podcast at the Festival of Politics.
Okay.
And I had 3 guests who would have been partly drawn from the political world, which is new for me and kind of exciting. So that was great.
Yeah, we've had a couple of politicians on Girls with Goals as well, which again is not what I had envisioned originally for it at all. We've had female and male politicians on it, but like that, you know, the appetite is there for that kind of content. So
somewhat clashing with your name.
I know, yeah, I know. That's it. Whenever I have a man on, which we do frequently, we always do, but there's a bit of irony in it. So we're open to everybody. That's what we like to say. Before I kind of want to talk about the festival that you're involved with, I do want to talk a little bit about kind of more anxiety and resolutions in this time of year, because the First Fortnight Festival, for people who don't know about it, you can get all the information on firstfortnight.ie. That's the website. And basically it is kind of about breaking down the stigmas around mental health, and it's in its 10th year now, so this is massive that Ireland is kind of doing it this year, and there's a huge amount of events taking place and things like that. But I do think that this time of year is a struggle for a lot of people in terms of anxiety and mental health, and even just the come down of the festive season. Like, do you buy into resolutions? Have you ever bought into resolutions, or what do you feel about the pressures that come along with that?
I did make a resolution this year.
Did you?
And it's to be a little bit more careful about how much time I'm spending on social media, but also how I'm using social media. So I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to flick between apps. So I'll flick from Twitter to Instagram to Facebook to Gmail, and then back again. I can do a whole circuit and keep going, you know. And I realised that when I started out on Twitter years back, it was a really valuable place for me to be, and it felt like it was very exciting and new, and people were maybe we were all maybe a bit more naive. And now I think Twitter has become a little bit more aggressive.
Oh God, it's terrifying. Like I think it's a terrifying platform, and the reason I say that is because I'm not big on Twitter at all. Well, I'm not big on anything, let's be honest. But like, you have a massive following on Twitter in terms of like Ireland, as in you've got a nice big following.
I've a decent following in the sense that, like, for somebody who deals largely with the arts, you know, I've definitely become, like, I suppose I've always loved Twitter. And so I really did pay a lot of attention to it. I think if the more attention you pay to Twitter, the more it sort of rewards you in terms of people know that actually they do these stats, and they say who is very responsive on Twitter. And I looked at my stats one time, and apparently I'm highly responsive. So if somebody drops me a little note or something on Twitter, I'm like, hey, you know. So like in ways I love that, because it means that you're getting in touch with people who might be the same as you in terms of their interests, or they might have something that would sort of be interesting to comment on. But yeah, I mean, I think just over the past 6 months, I've grown to realise that I'm increasingly concerned that I'm losing the time when I could be reading, learning, or doing something more interesting with family and friends. You know, I'm just vacantly going around these apps. And I suppose the other thing as well is, I mean, getting back to the topic of the talk that I'm doing at First Fortnight, anxiety, the art of anxiety is the name of it. And I think anxiety as a condition is on the rise, or has been on the rise over the past few years. And if you look at that in tandem with our mobile phone use and our social media usage, it strikes me that we all, in sort of our sort of office lives, are in a very always-on mentality.
Absolutely.
We wake up in the morning, we look at our phones. We go to bed at night, we look at our phones. Just before we shut off the light, you know, we are completely orientating our lives around this one tiny mobile phone, and it's worrying, because I think it's creating a situation where you feel a thrum of stress or strain sometimes at moments when you shouldn't be feeling like that at all.
Well, I was feeling stressed looking at people's New Year's resolutions that they were posting on Instagram. And I mean, obviously it's everybody's prerogative to post whatever they want to post about on social media. And I posted over Christmas, and I posted like from a mountain, like toasting to New Year's. But I've never really gone into depth about like what a great year I've had for this, and this reason. And for some reason, scrolling through, like you said, quite vacantly, just kind of mindlessly scrolling like I do, I was just looking at how incredible all of these years were, and it made me feel kind of shitty about myself, and it made me pressure, like I felt pressure to maybe post something or maybe feel a little bit more enlightened or something like that. So I think the resolutions this time of year and social media and anxiety seem to all kind of tie in together, and that just amounts to stress in my head anyway, like, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that.
This summer, I don't post a lot on Facebook, but this summer after the radio show finished, I made a lot of effort to go to a lot of festivals. I did a lot of live events. I hosted a lot of things, and I posted a lot of pictures from those events. Not thinking that much of it, but they were lovely pictures, and I did have a lovely summer in certain respects, but it was coming in the backdrop of having had quite a tough time as well. And somebody came up to me that I hadn't seen in a while, and she came up at Christmas and she said, "Oh, you know, I saw your pictures on Facebook." She said, "You made me feel so crap about my life. You had such a great summer." I was like, "Oh no."
Yeah.
That was like almost for me as a way to, you know, bring up my own life a little bit, and then I thought about it, and I was like, my God, we're all engaged in this silent competition.
I know.
And we're doing each other no favours at all, because all that's happening is somebody else looks at those photographs and thinks that you're living essentially you know, the MTV style video where everything is perfect. And of course that's not the way at all. But yeah, I would love to see manners and intelligence brought back to apps like Twitter, because more and more friends of mine, journalists, writers, presenters, have left the medium entirely, because either they have been relentlessly trolled, or they have been made to feel small or shamed, and that is just, it's not good enough. And I see very big name commentators as well weighing in. They are forgetting their manners and they're looking for followers, because it's all about engagement. Anyone will tell you it's about engagement, but actually if you're turning into a cartoon version of yourself, I think you need to stop and take a look at yourself in the mirror and say, actually, is this who I want to be online? Do I want to be a bully? Do I want to try and shame people? None of that is good.
Because I saw that you were trolled pretty heavily recently, and I mean, like, obviously you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but it was a piece that you wrote in the Sunday Business Post, and I thought it was an interesting piece, and I thought it was a piece that, like, you know, it was an opinion piece, which is the kind of stuff that you do, and I think that's a crucial point about it. But you were talking about what I think is really relevant at this time of year as well, just the way that women are told to feel about their own bodies. And
well, it was a piece
kind of
about
things.
feminism and choice, and actually I did get quite trolled for that.
I saw some of the comments were...
Oh, I don't even know at this point, I just blocked them. But it was actually quite good food for thought, because I'd never had that experience before. I've been very sheltered. And the commentators hadn't read the piece because it hadn't been published.
That's it.
So they had seen a caption and they'd seen a picture, and
I think that's a bigger indication of what the trolls can be like, because I saw a few Irish supporters of you kind of like weighing in and being like, have you read the piece?
Wasn't published.
Do you know what this piece is about? And it was just that someone had picked up on something, and then it just kind of turned into this mass frenzy. So
I have to say though, I found it difficult, but then I don't mean to sound all over about this, but I now see it as very valuable, because I have seen friends of mine receive really, really horrible abuse online, and I never fully understood what it might feel like to be in that situation.
And now you understand.
And now I do. And so once you've had that experience, your entire comprehension of how these apps work, and how in the space of 5 or 6 seconds, you know, the space of time it takes to send a tweet, your entire kind of experience of Twitter can change, is very clear to me. John Ronson wrote a book, I think it's called So You've Been Publicly Shamed or something like that, a few years back, and I interviewed him for it, and I thought at the time the book was really, really good, very perceptive, but I think his book is actually gaining in currency as the years go on. And I was listening to a radio conversation on Joe Duffy actually the other day about a young girl who had pictures taken from her Facebook and posted to a porn site, and she was describing how she was 14 when the pictures were taken and 17 when she found out about it. And that's what I mean by an instant. Something can just change, because you may think that you lead a relatively blameless life. You may think that, for example, you could write an opinion column or I could write an opinion column, and we may disagree with each other. And if we're sitting on the sofa now, we'll politely disagree and we'll say, I don't like that choice of phrase, or I don't like that sentence, or I'm not into that idea. And that will be fine. But on Twitter, all that goes out the door. And it's the Piers Morgan, Donald Trump style of debate, where it's all a way.
It's just one-upmanship, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that that again feeds back into why festivals like First Fortnight are becoming so much more important, because people are doing private battles with themselves in their own homes, because maybe they've had a partner, I don't know, a former partner send out a graphic image of them, or maybe something's happened that they don't talk about in the real world, but they're experiencing in the privacy of their own home. So I think all these things need to be brought out more, and actually, you know, they were talking about it the other day, but legislation needs to be brought in to protect people.
Absolutely. So the talk that you're kind of chairing sounds so interesting, and there's some familiar names. We've actually had Siobhan Murray on the show before as well, which is fantastic. And obviously Dave, who's Joe.ie, he's going to be there as well. So it's called The Art of Anxiety. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about that. So don't go anywhere. We are taking a quick break now. Molly Sterling is an incredible Irish talent. I don't even really need to introduce her. She represented Ireland at the Eurovision when she was only 17 years of age. She has her first headline gig in Whelan's in March, and she's also performing at the big gig for the First Fortnight. I knew I was going to mess it up eventually. First Fortnight Festival, which is happening January 12th, I believe. So Molly was in with us earlier on, so there you go. I'm joined now by musician Molly Sterling. Molly, you're very welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. So fancy.
So I'm a big fan. So fancy. I'm a big fan of yours, but you are by no means. We were just talking about your age there, which of course we're not going to say on camera because it's nobody's business. But you're by no means new to the music scene. You've performed at other Voices, Forbidden Fruit, Independence, to name a few. And let's be honest, your music gets rave reviews from kind of the top Irish music critics in the country, which is incredible. But 2019 seems to be just going to be bigger for you as well. You're headlining Whelan's in March, which is incredible. Obviously kind of an iconic place. And also you're taking part in the First Fortnight big gig on January 12th, which we're kind of talking about, you know, on this episode. So I think what I want to do first is just go back a little bit and kind of talk about, you know, for anybody who maybe is new to your music and new to you as well, when did it all begin for you? When did your love of music first start?
That's a really good question.
I think it's a pretty basic question. Doesn't everybody ask you that?
It's like basic, like not really.
You can be honest with me. It's
you know, but I'm like, actually, like that's a terrible question. Ask another one. I mean, it's a good question because it makes me think about when I began getting involved with music, because it kind of feels like I've just always been, it's always been in me, like I've always been doing it.
Yeah.
Like I was just mad. I was such a dramatic child. I'm still pretty dramatic, to be honest, but like I was like into like dancing, and the first time I was ever singing on stage, I was like I was singing Fallen by Alicia Keys.
Okay.
I was in like the
starting small.
Oh yeah, I was like, no, like let's just keep the bar here. But I had like a little cane and a top hat and a little waistcoat.
Drama.
But it was like all out. But like with that, then like I remember after that performance, like just like every time I've performed, I just like burst into tears at the start. I just get so like the anxiety would come like after I play, no matter how I play.
Wow.
Yeah, it's mad. So like that's whenever people ask me about like how I began with music, I always also think of my anxiety, my history with anxiety. It's
and
like,
with that, like that's interesting because like I've interviewed people before and we've spoken about it. And we were speaking about it with Nadine there as well, in terms of like anxiety and the arts, very much like, you know, people are starting to speak out about it a lot more now. But it's interesting that your performance anxiety would come after the fact, as opposed to like, would you not get nervous before, or was it always after?
I think like now I've kind of got more of a handle on it, but and I get like that healthy amount of
Adrenaline.
Yeah, of like energy, and I'm kind of like, cool, I don't want this energy of excitement to tip into anxiety and kind of, but yeah, before I'd like go into fits afterwards.
Really?
Yeah, it was really bad for my mum. I'd just be like, oh, it was so awful, and like, oh my God, I'm the worst, and just slating myself afterwards.
Just like really self-critical.
Yeah, so like really, really badly, and just like, and I think there was such a freedom in that moment only recently, only a few years ago, when I kind of realised like, Jesus, it's not for that reason. And then you kind of start writing about different things and performing differently, so that's cool. Yeah.
In terms of your writing, was that something, because obviously what you were saying there with the top hat and the cane, it felt very like you were maybe a performer from a young age, which there's nothing wrong with. But when did the songwriting kind of, because you know, I've read about musicians that they just like, it just like pours out of them and something, and it seems to be something that either, you know, you have or you don't have in terms of that ability. So when did that start for you, and when was the first time that you kind of sat down and was like, oh shit, I think I'm gonna be a songwriter?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, I think I started to take it seriously as like a career option, knowing that it's what I want to do from like a really young age. Yeah. Like from like 15, wow. I started being like, cool, what's my plan? Like, do you know, what do I want to, what's my like, I'm really bad at like business goals and looking at it like that. But
well, to be honest, at the age of 15, I don't know anybody who's like awesome at business plans. I'm 32 and I struggle with a business plan.
That's fair. Thank you.
No,
feel more together.
Well, yeah, but I mean, 15 is so young. Yeah. And you were already thinking about like this was going to be your career.
Yeah, like I was working and like recording and working on different tracks. But like from before then, I felt that sensation of when you start writing and it just keeps going. Yeah. And there's so many songs that I'd love to release at some point, but they don't really. I'm kind of at the point now where I like releasing stuff that is quite relevant to my headspace now, because it's quite drastically different to my headspace like 2 years ago. Even, you know. So.
We spoke there slightly about like, you know, basic music questions. So here's another one coming at you. Influences when you were like younger, I suppose, and when you were kind of developing your own sound. What was kind of the music that you were listening to, and were there any artists that you were like, wow, if I could be in any way like that person, my life would be made? Because we got goals on this show. So
goals.
Yeah, so just tell me about who were your hashtag goals when you were younger.
My hashtag muso goals.
Yes.
I think my early teens, which weren't that long ago.
Okay. We get it. You're young. Relax.
Just saying. But no, I was kind of just listening to whoever was put in front of me, and I love thinking about that kind of time when I realised who I really loved. Like I was obsessed with Stevie Nicks for so long. Yeah. Stevie Nicks, Laura Marling changed the game for me, and like Meatloaf, I was like, that dude is dramatic as hell. Like
I loved that video that he did. Let me think, you definitely weren't born. But it was the one where he was in the castle and there was this beautiful woman in the white dress.
It's like Beauty and the Beast boys.
Yeah. I loved that video. That was so amazing. Good. Yeah.
But
Meatloaf, that's a weird. I wasn't expecting that.
Oh man, like I think because there's always some sort of a dramatic undertone in my writing. It's like that kind of sense of a ballad somewhere, suppressed ballad. But Laura Marling, Keaton Henson, I've been a fan of for a long time, and a lot of those like idols, people that I really idolised when I was younger, it's like still true to now, and I'm still trying to kind of live up to like artistically where they've gone, you know.
I mean, I was reading some of the writings about your work and people like Niamh and stuff like this, just talking about how you are essentially a wordsmith. And you said there that you have these dramatic undertones that kind of come out. Like, in terms of the themes, like, do they just pop into your head because you may have, like, experienced that? Or is it something that you were like, I want to write about that now. Like you said there, that 2 years ago it would be very different.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it very much about what you're going through in your own life and then you write about it and that becomes it?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think I'm more of a conscious writer now, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I think right now I'm writing less, but I'm kind of doing more. So it's kind of a headspace thing too. But like, I don't know. It's kind of a hard one because two or 3 years ago, I had no idea at the time when I was writing what was going on, like what was happening. It's just you're in a space.
Yeah.
And I always found the like after the fact really interesting, where you're kind of analysing your own state of mind in that song.
Well, that's it. It's so personal as well. Like, I mean, do you ever worry about being that honest in terms of your writing? Because artists get dragged for that, particularly female artists at times get really dragged for, you know, sometimes being too honest, and you know sometimes with males it doesn't happen. So I mean, does that ever pop into your head, or is it just completely your process and it doesn't matter?
It definitely did at the beginning. At the beginning I was like terrified because it did feel like, I'm very sensitive about who I was performing in front of and like who was there and who was, because in my head when I started gigging I was like, this is a massive, just like 40 minutes of a confession, and like I've had a pint with this person, I don't really even know them.
It's like reading your journal essentially.
Yeah, but I think it's like cryptic enough because I love like poetry and being like kind of, and metaphors and the kind of cheesiness in that, and kind of incorporating that too. So it wouldn't ever be like too direct sometimes, but yeah.
This is something that I've always wondered, like, so obviously now you're gigging so much and you're you know, working obviously incredibly hard and you're really starting to get like the bigger gigs. Do you practice as much as maybe you used to do, or is it just gig?
I mean, I don't practice as much as I should.
But is that a thing? Because I mean, like, if you don't practice at sport, for example, you get really bad at it. But I mean, are you gigging so much and it's just your job now that you don't practice? You can tell me.
To be honest, I'm like, let me just tell you something. Just you. I think I've definitely noticed my vocal 2 years, like even a year ago, was like way better than it is now. It's like a struggle now to kind of hit certain notes. But I'm also using different parts. I think practice kind of depends on like, on your lifestyle. I'd love to practice more, but it's kind of settling into a lifestyle where you know that you have settled into and you're okay with saying no to a lot of the things your friends would be doing because you want to be in your room on your own practicing. You know, it's not always like stimulating, and it's not always fun. And like I'm really bad. I've just no focus. I'm really bad at practicing, but I do. Once I get into the zone of it and I'm like, cool, now last week I set aside like 3 days of just a few hours of hammering out the same thing, and like when you start to see a difference, it's you know, it's worth it, but like I'm definitely really bad at it. I need to get better, to be honest.
So in terms of like your age and how young you are, and comparing that to like how established you are at the moment, you know, in terms of the amount of work that you've done so far, what advice would you have for girls your own age who are maybe trying to break into the music industry at the moment, or they're finding it hard, or they're maybe, you know, releasing YouTube videos and it's getting absolutely no views? Because I know that that's kind of a way that people maybe are going now, as opposed to kind of the gig route essentially. But I suppose there's so many different ways that people can do it. But what do you think would be the best advice for people who really want to make it but are maybe feeling like there's no chance?
I don't really know. Like, advice with music in general is a lot of the time just like pointless. Sometimes it's really important and people cling on to it, but I've always found advice just makes me feel really overwhelmed. I'm
really?
Because everybody's...
Because if people offered advice to you like throughout your career,
they totally have, and I would kind of tend to just like videos with interviews of like people, of musicians that I love. There was one piece of advice that I think is really good, and it's basically like just be open-minded but be stubborn, and that's kind of what I try to do. And it's hard because I love being a people pleaser, but you can't. I would say kind of drop the notion of being a people pleaser if you want to be in music, because you need to make something that's you, or whatever sort of ethos you want to adapt with the art that you're making.
But it is different now as well, as in nobody's trying to make you Britney Spears.
That's the
right?
thing,
I
yeah.
mean, I would hope not anyway, because it's so different from what you do that that would be crazy. But I mean, 10 years ago, if somebody maybe saw the talent that you have in terms of your vocals and songwriting, they might have snatched you up and been like, oh shit, we've got this incredible pop princess.
It's definitely tried to happen.
Has it actually?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Absolutely. Especially when you're getting in younger.
Yeah.
I would also, I guess, any advice would be there's no rush. I remember I'm can't stand it now, but I used to be mad into X Factor and stuff.
Okay.
And I'd be again, so dramatic, such a dramatic kid, but I'd just be streams of tears coming down my face because there'd be someone on X Factor that's 16 and I'd be I'm that age, and oh my god, and I'm here and they're there, and just constantly comparing yourself when
And did you ever consider going for it, or did you?
No. But
maybe a good thing.
Maybe a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just
so kind of shy away a little bit from advice essentially, and just try and be your own person.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to kind of decipher sometimes who to take advice from.
Yeah.
Because I find people love giving advice. People think people are let me tell you now how you should go about this, and you're
I think kind of Irish people love that as well.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
And it's nice, but you need to. I think I used to think I had to take on everyone's advice, and then it gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think knowing that you don't have to take everyone's advice, and especially now, like what you're saying, there's so many different ways to go about having a career in music.
Yeah.
That you can really create what you want. If you can see it and it's something that you'd be happy doing every day, then you can always make it happen. It's just sometimes you won't be able to go for pints, do you know what I mean? That's kind of it. You can't go for pints.
Well, I think that's brilliant advice. You can't go for pints.
Yeah, don't go for pints.
Yeah, don't go for pints. So 2019, like I said there at the beginning, it's going to be a pretty big year for you. You have new music coming out as well soon. Tell us about that. What can we expect from it?
I'm so excited about this new stuff.
Tell us.
It's just I've been working with Ryan Vale and Keelan Austin, and it's just and then the guys that play in the band with me, Enda and Colin and Laura, it was with this song that we're bringing out in February. Hopefully.
And this is Feeble, right?
This is Feeble,
okay.
Yeah. It's just one of those songs that everyone was on the same page.
Yeah.
And it was a really new direction in terms of me feeling comfortable with what I'd done already with different songs, and feeling comfortable enough to kind of experiment a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
With tones and sounds, and kind of seeing the lads in the studio work that stuff out, and I learnt a lot from it, but it's definitely more balls to the wall than the others. So. Okay. It's not meant it's still a sad song and it's slow, but
balls to the wall.
I mean,
and it's called Feeble. Okay.
Balls to the wall ballad.
A balls to the wall ballad. So that's coming out in February. Amazing. And you're also performing at the First Fortnight big gig, which is taking place in Dublin on January 12th as well. Yeah. And then, of course, you're going to be headlining Whelan's, and that's in March, right?
That's March 22nd, yeah.
Okay, how do you feel about that? Amazing, is it?
I'm so excited to be able to,
I mean, you've performed there before, though, but,
Yeah, I've never... But it's performing there before as a support or as part of a festival, you can't really craft your own kind of set and your own show. So... I think what's most exciting about this for me is being able to really portray what you want to in terms of visuals. You've got that option. Yeah. You've got total control over sound, and just kind of being able to really, really perform what you've been working on for years.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like a cool kind of a landmark.
Absolutely, yeah. It really does. So. Yeah. best of luck with that. I'm excited for it, and people can still get tickets for Whelan's.
Yeah.
And they can also go to the First Fortnight website, and you can get more information about that big gig as well, which is happening. We do have a snippet of one of Molly's tracks now as well. It's Stripped Down, and it's you performing it live. Would you call this a balls to the wall ballad as well, or is it a little bit more?
It's emotionally balls to the wall. It's definitely not sonically balls to the wall.
This interview took a turn. And also go and, of course, follow Molly Sterling on all her social medias. It's incredible. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in Whelan's. I can't wait.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks.
My broken binding, my psychedelic nomad with a hairband made of thieves. You know you stole me, know you stole me, baby. So don't worry about the scars around my mouth. Take a bite just to spit me out. My lovers would simply pass me down, filter the bitterness. I am open but impossible to draw. I am a town after a hurricane is brought the road into the surface. I'm destroyed, I'm obvious. Oh, I'm obvious, I'm
That was the incredible Molly Sterling there. Like I mentioned, she'll be performing at First Fortnight's big gig on January 12th. So all the information that you need is over on the website. And there's still tickets available for that. Unfortunately, there isn't tickets available for The Art of Anxiety, which our guest Nadine O'Regan is chairing. And that's in Whelan's on January 9th. The event is sold out, but luckily we have Nadine right here. So you can tell us all about what we're missing out on. But it's so interesting. So tell us a little bit about it, and the name in particular, The Art of Anxiety. Where did that come from?
It's looking at the topic of anxiety through the medium of the arts. I think we live in an era where anxiety is coming to the fore, and I thought it would be really interesting to chat to artists and people working in the arts who've either experienced anxiety or been around it in some respect, to come in and just have a chat about how they feel, how they get on in terms of their working lives. Kathy Davie is somebody who's, well, I should say Kathy Davie is a part of the talk. She's an amazing artist and musician, and she has been very public in the past about how she struggled with anxiety so much while she was touring that she actually retreated from the limelight for a number of years and found solace actually through working with animals. She's a co-founder of the My Lovely Horse Animal Rescue charity, which is brilliant.
Amazing name as well.
Yeah, and she came back around then to music through finding something else that I suppose alleviated that stress for her. So she's somebody who I think maybe had a very tough experience, but then there were other musicians, and we'll be talking about, I suppose, musicians and other artists as well, who find that they experience anxiety maybe when they're out with family and friends, and for them, actually going on tour and making music is the thing that gives them solace. Yeah. So anxiety can be a barrier to creating art, or it can be, I think, a spur to creating art. There is no one way, so I think it's kind of very interesting to explore that. But we also have live performances from I Have a Tribe. Dave Her.ie, arts commentator extraordinaire, is going to be there.
Her.ie.
And also we'll be joined by the author Siobhan Murray, who's written a book on exactly that topic about burnout and how to find solutions. She had been working in the music industry and left because she realised that it wasn't for her, and her life wasn't proceeding the way she had hoped it would. So I mean, the fact that the talk is sold out to me suggests that a lot of people are experiencing this, maybe privately. And what was interesting was I went online and I could see that a lot of people were buying tickets singly, which doesn't usually happen. Usually it's like 2s or 4s or whatever. But there were people who just clearly want to be there, don't even necessarily want to tell anyone, but just want to go along and maybe get something from it, something that helps them live their lives in a way that maybe is more comforting.
I mean, this festival, it's in its 10th year now. So, I mean, and mental health obviously is something that's been around since the beginning of time. It's been
But we had it
definitely
under different labels, you know. People would say, you know, oh, she suffers with her nerves. That would be the kind of thing people would say.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, she's a little, you know, the smelling salts would be talked about, this kind of thing.
Hysterical and all that
Hysterical
kind of thing.
women.
And I think now, especially, you know, with the likes of people like Davie and then Brezzy as well, like a big musician.
And Caroline Foran.
Yeah, exactly. Talking more openly about mental health and anxiety. The stigma is coming down and people are talking about it, but you've been interviewing musicians and people in the arts for a really long time now.
Years and
years.
years.
You're so old. Let's just get it out there. You're so old there.
Me and the dinosaurs.
You know, I realised it as I said it. I was like, just stop calling women
you're
old.
grand.
Stop calling women old on your show, Niamh. It's rude.
I've got my Zimmer frame over in the corner.
So just back in the day when you were interviewing the Stones.
Actually, when the Frames did their tour, what was it, their, God, I can't remember what their anniversary was, but it was a long anniversary, but they were going to call it, jokingly, the Zimmer Frames for the Ivy Gardens gig, which would have been kind of cool.
Been great, yeah.
But yeah.
Was this something that kind of you knew about? You knew that artists experience this, maybe, because it does seem like a lot of them, and even performance anxiety, which I always find a weird thing to hear about, people who seem so confident but then have like horrific stage fright. But was this something that just wasn't spoken about for a really long time, and now finally artists are starting to say, actually, there's a huge correlation between the arts and anxiety, and now we're actually just in a position where society is more accepting?
Yeah, and I think society is getting better, and for all that I have complained a little bit about social media is good at connecting in that sense, because I think people are becoming a little bit more open and sharing their problems. But for me, a lot of artists at least seem to have maybe a layer of skin missing sometimes. They can be more vulnerable, and that's maybe why they create art. I don't want to stereotype. There are plenty of people who maybe don't make art from those kind of concerns, but while it's a difficult topic, I think, in a way to talk about without stereotyping, there's no doubt that if I'm having a rough day and I go out to the pub or to the coffee shop and I talk to my friends, I feel better. And this festival and social media, when it's being positive, is all a way of just sharing our own private concerns and hopefully getting to a place where we feel more able to deal with them. And so whether you're an artist or a non-artist, just a professional, maybe working in an office, I think there's a commonality to that we can try and say, let's be a little bit honest about it. There was a friend of mine over Christmas who shared her experiences of anxiety on Instagram, having never spoken about it previously, and I just thought it was so brave. And she did say a few people unfollowed her in the wake of that.
Wow.
But so be it, you know. Maybe some people don't want to hear it, but for other people out there, it would be a great consolation. January is a tough time, and for every person that maybe will write off, I suppose, mental health conditions as dismissing it under certain, you know, there's the whole snowflake, the millennial syndrome, the way people use these reductive terms. There'll be someone else who will come across a talk or maybe something online, and they will get something very valuable from it, and that's why you do it.
See, I think it definitely helps people. But I worry sometimes about social media in terms of it being a platform that so frequently is used as a slightly narcissistic tool, and I absolutely hold my hands up. I post selfies constantly. I've actually been told to stop at times. So I do that. Oh, followers of mine. It's like, stop posting selfies. I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks for that. I worry sometimes about, you know, people who maybe have a platform who then talk about, you know, severe mental health issues as being triggering, just because, you know, I was talking to somebody who had suffered from anxiety before, who didn't have any kind of social media platform, and she found it triggering more so than being helpful. So like, I worry sometimes about social media in general, about at times, you know, is it helping? As in, that friend of yours who maybe spoke about her anxiety, like what what is she getting out of it? Like, and not in a bad way, but what is she getting out of it in terms of like, is it a healing process for people to post on Instagram about a mental health issue, do you think?
Oh, it's such a difficult topic.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's a real balm. It's a way to help them progress. And then for other people, you'll see them post more and more nakedly confessional posts until one day they leave.
Because I would feel that if she was unfollowed then by a bunch of people, would that not give her a little bit of anxiety too? And I mean, is that like, I know that like social media in general can be quite anxiety inducing for lots of people. So, you know, I mean, it's kind of one of those things of like, should we really be well equipped before we kind of comment on it in case it is triggering for other people?
Yeah. There's no doubt that you become swayed in the direction of the likes and the follows and the retweets. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
There is a line, which I'm misquoting, which is that compliments can be a form of enslaving people because you tend to follow in the direction of somebody who's offering you a nice comment about yourself. And so if you've shared in a very confessional way online and then people tell you you're brave or you're great, maybe you start to share more and then maybe it becomes uncomfortable for you, but then you feel you've got to a place where you have these followers because you share. So I think it is very important all the time to step back and think to yourself, is this still the right thing for me? Am I still getting as much from this as I'm giving? And if not, what do I do to change that?
Yeah, and I think people online who have platforms have a responsibility as well to make sure that, you know, if they are posting about their mental health, that they're doing so for all the right reasons. And if it works to help other people, then that's obviously a positive thing. But, you know, I just remember I just had this like kind of off the cuff conversation with someone who said that it had really triggered them. And that scared me a little bit because I was like, oh God, you know, like we can't take it too lightly either and just think that because it's a new year, new me, new resolutions, this year is going to be great, that, you know, a lot of people are really struggling around this time.
I think people are just way more brittle now. At least that's what I've noticed. Friends of mine who are bigger on social media, who use Instagram and Twitter, sometimes, I don't know, like you meet them and something might have happened to them online that you won't even know about and they'll have a really crap day because of it. And then you go meet somebody for a coffee who doesn't have any of the online stuff, who doesn't use Facebook, doesn't use Twitter, and they're just having their real lives. And you can look at it and go, okay, you're missing out to some extent, but you're also gaining in another way. So it is important to just keep a check on it.
Yeah, absolutely, and just kind of remember that it's not real life as well. So I think
we exist in a bubble. I mean, we work in the media and we're surrounded by other people who work either in the media or media-related industries. And then there are young professionals who use Twitter and Instagram and actually not so much Facebook because that's kind of seen as a parent's generation now. But they're sort of native Facebook or Twitter users, if you like. They can't even imagine a world where those sort of apps or Instagram isn't there. And it is getting to the point where we don't know the difference anymore. That we don't even acknowledge that there's a whole world out there where people couldn't give a toss about whatever anyone was up to online. And I think it's important to just keep remembering that.
Yeah,
and
I'm jealous sometimes of those people because obviously we're insular as well. Like it is a part of our jobs to be on social media and to do those kind of things.
Would you be on social media if you weren't in the media?
I don't know because I've always worked in the media, so I don't.
Like, if you were, say, a dentist.
Yeah. Oh, probably be posting pictures of my teeth, to be honest with you. Yeah, I feel like it's just a part of my personality. I do enjoy social media, you know, but again, because it's been so much a part of my professional career in terms of the change.
So you've never had to justify it, because I've always been the same as that. I'm like, oh, it's not a decision I have to make because I work in print media and broadcast media, then it's obvious that I would be on social media.
And also it grew around me, as in like when I graduated from college, it was Bebo. Do you know what I mean? So there was no
Wow.
Instagram, Facebook. So I was like,
Sorry, speaking of Zimmer frames.
sorry, but I mean, this is it. So it grew around me. I had no choice, basically. I had to. I remember talking about, I had Tom McGurk talking to like the Twitter founder guy about like my first tweet. And I just remember it was the funniest hour of my life.
Sorry, was Tom McGurk a girl with
No,
goals?
Tom McGurk was presenting his own show on a different radio station, which I won't mention, but he was just like, what is this I won't impersonate him either. I'm so sorry, Tom. But he was like, what is this Twitter machine, you know? Like, so that was kind of, it definitely like developed as we, you know, grew with our own careers. So it wasn't ever something that I ever said, oh, I'm going to be on Instagram and I'm going to be
Have you ever hit the delete button? Have you ever considered it?
I've definitely considered it on Facebook, but again, because of my job, like I can't really. And Twitter, it's just my job. I only ever post things about Twitter. Instagram, I could probably pull back from a little bit in terms of just my stories and stuff like that. But I mean, in terms of like resolutions, and you did say that you're going to try and maybe
Just use it more wisely.
but I think it's so interesting because
If an hour has passed and I am just flicking, there's something wrong.
Exactly.
Like
And
there are books to read. There is, you know, like there's a film to watch. There's a play to go and see.
Yeah.
There are friends to meet and family to meet. And I'm flicking around
Yeah.
on these is absolutely pointless.
So it's all really well connected, I think, the kind of
Having said that, you
social
can follow
media
me if you
use.
like.
Oh yeah, well I already do. Just wait, just
I'm
waiting for the
joking.
follow back.
Oh
to
my
be
god,
honest.
totally. But no, but like that's the thing. You see, I'll immediately go, oh, I've got to use Twitter like, less, and then I'm
Yeah.
like, but yeah, get in touch on Twitter.
yeah,
Like,
no.
oh my
Check out
god,
this
what a
article I wrote,
contradiction!
yeah.
I apologize.
No. But I mean, that's it. Like, isn't the world that we live in is just full of contradiction anyway, especially the media industry, like 100%. But in terms of like, we've kind of been speaking about so many different things today, but I think like talking about resolutions and talking about anxiety and talking about ourselves and our own relationship with social media is so much connected, because I think that's one of the things that's really affecting people, especially now, especially in the second week of January. That's why I think the First Fortnight festival is so valuable, because I think it's a great time to kind of have people reevaluate what's going on in their own lives, and
just
also
hear stories, you know?
stories. And your event is real live people in person talking to each
I
other, so
know.
it's not flicking.
But see, that's the fun thing. Like the last few months, I've been doing a lot of live events, and I've really just enjoyed seeing actual people in a room react to. Because when I was in a radio studio, I had no idea. I mean, you get texts, but you don't really have an idea about what people think. And then you see the person, and you see the type of person that would either come to a talk or be interested in what you're interested in. And it's actually very, very rewarding. Like it really is. And it's about community, because we have this social media community, but it's cold because it's all through surfaces
and it's all likes
computers.
and stuff like that. And can you imagine if you were in that room, Nadine, and everybody that was there who was really appreciating the work that you were doing came up and like tapped you physically to give you like a like. Imagine that. And then imagine if they did it by accident, they came up and tapped you twice. They were like, oh, I didn't mean to like that. Sorry, I'm out of here. But it's so random when you think about it like that. But that's what we're expecting when we put it out there. Like we want those little clicks. But imagine if everyone was coming up to you and like tapping you and liking you like that at this event. It's bonkers. So I think it is good to kind of keep that in mind and just be aware of that around this time of year. But I want to ask before I let you go, because I've kept you for a long time and I know you've got places to go. What would you say to people who are maybe listening and who are struggling at this time of year in terms of like a new year and maybe a resolution, but trying to stay realistic and trying to really keep a balance and not getting hyped up by everything that's being targeted to us as women specifically? Because 25 gyms are coming for me at the moment against my will on Instagram specifically. Do you know what I mean? Like the ads are coming at me. And
well, I mean, I don't mean to sound all like Socrates like about it, but I think, or is it Plato? But it's like know thyself. The whole idea of resolutions, I think they can be valuable, but they can also be very distressing, because if you set a resolution for yourself that is too lofty and then you fail to achieve that resolution, then you feel like crap. So your entire effort has been to make you feel bad about yourself. So just in general, pretty much anything I've tried to do, and it gets back to what you asked me at the start, was to define yourself in 6 words or less. And I define myself as saying I'm an arts fan. That's what I'm about. And so I'd always go back to that and go, like, think about who you are, who you really are. And if you've always hated swimming, don't say you're going to swim. You know, just try and do a little of the thing that you like doing anyway. So tap into that. Tap into what's achievable and also what's enjoyable. Like, I've always loved running. And I would go running and never put like one of those Fitbit things on or do any of that, because I realised that once I started getting competitive with myself, I would push myself further and further to the point where I wasn't enjoying it anymore. So just do something, a little bit more of something that is good for you and that you enjoy, and I think it won't go too far wrong.
Yeah, because it's a nice time as well. Like, it is, fresh starts are good, I think, as well. Like, at the end of the day, everybody likes kind of opening a new diary. And
Did you enjoy 2018?
Yeah, I had a great time. I just didn't post about how much I loved it, like, but I had a great year. But I was just looking at everybody else's great year, and I just felt too much pressure about what I wanted to say. And
well, what do you want for 2019?
I just want to continue to kind of, you know, do good work and continue to be happy in my personal life, which was a really great thing that happened in 2018. And I mean, anybody who follows me on Instagram knows that. So that's kind of, just want to kind of continue to do it. And I think that's one of the things as well, like, nothing crazy happened to me in 2018. Like 2017, I changed my career entirely. So I did feel like doing a big, huge post about that and like putting up all the crazy emojis and stuff. And 2018, 2019, I'm just kind of...
You're jaded. You're like, oh.
rolling through, and I just don't, I don't have that in me anymore. There's also...
but there's a great sense of, so many people are jaded by other people's Instagram posts about the new year. You know, that people are like, no, I can't do it. You
kind of jaded by myself as well. Like, that's why I don't want to...
But if it was a good year, then sometimes you don't need to talk about it in a way, because just because it was good.
Yeah,
you know?
That's nice. I'm going to take that as like my solace. The piece of advice I have for you, Nadine, have you watched the new Netflix series that's called Tidying Up?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is
Who have you been talking to? My God.
This is my New Year's resolution. I don't know if you're messy or not.
Least tidy person.
Her name is Marie Kondo. I'm the least tidiest person.
No, she has a book. I know she has a book.
It's a life-changing something of tidying up. I've watched 4 episodes in the last day, right? And so...
This is from Paul Donegan, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know if he watched it as well, right? But I've watched 4 episodes of it. And since then, I have bagged up half of my entire wardrobe. And I'm only keeping things that are sparking joy in me. And I know that sounds like such an Instagram thing, but it is life-changing.
It's really good for exes as well, because like if you had like, I don't know, a jumper that an ex gave you,
or something like
and
that.
if you pick it up, I am aware of her philosophy, although I haven't seen the series, but if you pick it up and a little dart of pain goes through you, like just throw it into a black plastic bag.
Away.
Get rid of it.
Yeah.
There's no need for it to be there.
Yeah.
If, however, that person gave you something absolutely lovely that you still want to hang on to, that's okay, keep that.
Absolutely.
But everything else, gone. Totally agree with that.
So that's what I've been doing. I've been rolling up my jeans and just talking to them, like, since I've been watching this.
You give me joy.
Yeah.
Do you give me joy,
You give me so much joy. Oh, she proper talks to her clothes, like, and she says thank you to the ones that she's throwing away. I haven't been sitting in my room saying thank you to my clothes. Little bit.
Yeah, well, I did the recycling walk of shame earlier, you know, after Christmas when you bring the bottles of wine down to the... So I did throw out some clothes, like, earlier today as well, and I didn't consciously do the Marie Kondo.
Marie Kondo, yeah.
Effort, but having said that, I feel like, I do feel better. I feel better leaving.
It does. It feels a little bit lighter, I have to say. So if anything like that would kind of be my thing. And I did an Instagram about it, actually, ironically. So I'm trying to kind of do that as well. But I suppose to each their own. Resolutions are, you know, really empowering for some people, and for other people they don't want to do them, so that's absolutely fine too. I think what you're doing with the First Fortnight Festival is incredible. It'd be amazing to see like more kind of live events like this in the future as well.
I hope so,
yeah, and I think it would be really, really great. Like I said earlier though, unfortunately it is all sold out. But go and follow Nadine, everything that we were talking about there, on her social media, on her Twitter and her Instagram and everything like that. And thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolutely brilliant experience.
And we won't tell them how many times we had to stop because of my mistakes, but it's the second week in January, so please don't give me a hard time.
No mistakes. Technical issues.
Technical issues, exactly. And your podcast, of course, it's called...
My Roots Are Showing, and it's on Spotify, Acast, iTunes, SoundCloud. It is everywhere, apparently, that there is a podcast, and it's just growing at the moment. I'm only on my 3rd one, but I'd love it if people could check it out and drop me a line once you listen to it.
Absolutely. And she has great engagement on Twitter, so she'll write back to you.
I would totally write back.
Yeah, she'll totally write out. That is all the time that we have for this week. Thank you so much to Nadine O'Regan and also Molly Sterling for coming in. All the information that you need for the First Fortnight Festival is online at www.firstfortnight.ie. I'm Niamh Maher, and we will chat to you next week.